fork?
Okay, let's try this again. Welcome to Forking Off, the podcast for people who said no to just following orders, where we explore the very personal decisions behind leaving federal service, whether by choice or by force. Every departure has a story, and we're here to share them.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Forking Off. I'm Jill Fields.
And I'm Philip Fields.
And today we have with us Dr. Sarah DeGue. Hi, Sarah. How are you? Did I say your name right?
Yes. Thank you, Jill and Philip. It's great to see you and talk to you this morning.
Oh, thanks for joining us. We're so excited to have you. So let's get started with your bluff, your bottom line up front, who you are and where you work.
I was a senior scientist in CDC's Division of Violence Prevention for the last 17 years, and I was RIF'd on April 1st. I'm a forensic psychologist by training, and now I run a consulting group called Violence Prevention Solutions, where we're trying to move the work that we did within the government out into the private sector and help communities implement evidence-based violence prevention strategies.
That is really amazing. And I want to hear more about that in a little bit, because that just to turn things around and be able to continue helping the community. Thank you. Thank you. So let's talk about your past, like how you ended up with CDC, how you came to public service.
Yeah, so I have a PhD in clinical psychology, and as I was expecting when I left grad school to go into research and maybe private practice, but when I saw a job appear at CDC in the Division of Violence Prevention, I was like, this sounds really cool. I didn't know that the Division of Violence Prevention existed then, even though I had been working in violence research for, 5-6 years at that point. And it just sounded like such a different twist on what I was doing. I was working primarily with perpetrators in the criminal justice system, although also seeing some clients in the community, most of whom had a violence victimization history. And it sounded really appealing to me to be able to work on the other side of that, to try to stop violence before it starts instead of dealing with the aftermath. Of course, both of those things are important. We need to have services for survivors. We need to have a system that can rehabilitate people who've harmed other people and try to keep people safe. But I really think that focusing on the front end of that was appealing to me because it really stops that pipeline and protects people to begin with. And so I started working at CDC in 2008 and left academia at that time. The entire time I worked at CDC, I was in the Division of Violence Prevention's Research and Evaluation branch, where I conducted research on effective strategies to prevent violence. Most of that was sexual violence and later teen dating violence. Those were kind of my focus areas where I had done the most work prior to coming to CDC. But over those years, I developed expertise more generally in applying the public health model to prevent violence across the board. So we work on sexual violence, intimate partner and teen dating violence, child abuse and neglect, suicide, youth violence, community and firearm violence, elder abuse and maltreatment, sort of all forms of violence, with one exception, and that was more of the targeted violence. So in the last few years, we also started working with the Department of Homeland Security to develop a public health approach to prevent targeted violence and terrorism, domestic as well. And that was really exciting work for me. And I was really happy to help them sort of start developing the evidence base and thinking through how we can prevent mass violence, ideological violence, and hate crimes as well. That work is no longer continuing either, but I'm happy to have had all of the experiences that I did over the last 17 years because it really gave me a sense of the scope and nature of the problem of violence and also what we can do about it. So we know a lot about what can prevent violence. And the challenge now is that most of the people who had that knowledge are gone from the government. Not entirely. We're still here. But we don't have that expertise in the government anymore, almost entirely. And that is a big problem.
That's a huge problem. Big just feels like not a big enough word for that. It is unreal that this is where we are being in the FBI, being intelligence analyst in the intelligence community, we also work on that prevention side. You don't want to be on the back end of it where people have been injured, people have been hurt, people have been killed. You want to be on that front end so that you can prevent all of it. And violence prevention, to not have experts in that field continuing to study, continuing to prevent. Sarah, that's really, really scary.
You mentioned your work with DHS on countering targeted violence, and sure, we can't go too far into that, but I really worry about those kinds of programs because I know that they were already sort of not the main focus of the organization. And if they're losing support, then that's not good for the long term.
Absolutely. No, it is really scary to think about the lack of investment in prevention and what that means 5 years from now, even for 6 months from now. But prevention is a long game, is what I always say. You get up in the community as early as possible and you try to prevent the development of risk and encourage protective factors throughout the lifespan of someone so that by the time they get to adolescence and adulthood, they have lower risk and they're much less likely to engage in violence to begin with. We are cutting off that pipeline of support, of services, of programs that people need in this generation now at a time when there's already a mental health epidemic, there's a suicide epidemic, there has been a rise in violent extremism. And we're turning that off and we're saying, you know what, you're all on your own. How about just, the nonprofit sector, which already has really small budgets to work with, deals with that problem, mostly on the back end, mostly in response to violence and supporting survivors after the fact anyways. And we're not going to do prevention anymore. That is really dangerous in the long run. Even if this goes on for a few years, even at this point, it's been 6 months, 8 months, and 40 years of work has been destroyed just in the Division of Violence Prevention. And I can't imagine what that looks like across the entire government and even just across the pieces of the government that address violence. It is a devastating hit that I think could, if we started now, take 10 years to undo at best. We've lost our experts, we've lost our momentum, we've lost our programs. Interestingly, some of the funding still exists, but there is no one to administer that funding. There's no one to make sure that that funding is used effectively and in line with science. So that is a bit of a problem, right? Taxpayers expect their money to be used wisely. And as you know from working in the government for many years, we all did the best that we could with that. It's obviously not always easy in the government because there are so many bureaucratic hurdles to getting things done efficiently at all times. But I've never met a person in 17 years that wasn't trying. And that is all kind of down the tubes now. And that's as just a citizen now, we're all on the outside. We're all fully terminated. That is scary. That is scary to think about. So what I wanted to do with my business was try to rebuild and reinvent what we are doing in violence prevention so that it doesn't rely completely on the government or on nonprofits with small budgets who needed that support from the government to make sure that we can still keep this work alive as long as possible and hopefully maybe even make it more effective than it was.
That's really inspiring. The nonprofits that I've sort of been used to following over the last 10 years, a lot of them, their budgets are extremely constricted now, and they don't sort of have the ability that they did 10 years ago to do a lot of the work that they were doing. So it is great to see new people coming in with new ideas and trying to tackle it with the experience and background that you have.
Yeah, I hope that it can be effective. It's been a challenge to become what I keep saying is a business lady after being a scientist for 25 years and a researcher and just kind of a subject matter expert to learn something new. But it's also really exciting and fun. And I'm really enjoying it. And one piece that keeps me going, in addition to, knowing how serious this problem is and that we don't want to lose all this expertise that we built and which, frankly, taxpayers paid us to build for many years. We don't want to lose that. We don't want everyone to go into other fields and drop out of this, which is what a lot of people are doing because there aren't enough jobs in violence prevention. I wanted to try to create a space where my team, my colleagues from CDC can start to rebuild, can have jobs, can continue to work together and protect that expertise and those resources that we had. Even now, some more people from the Division of Violence Prevention were riffed again last week, and there are even fewer people left, even fewer capacity. I had one person left on my former team, which was the team that led the Dating Matters Teen Dating Violence Comprehensive Prevention Model Initiative. And she was trying to get a big project that we had almost finished over the finish line this year, which would have launched a new version of the model that communities could use to implement effective teen dating violence prevention in communities at low cost. With all the materials being free from CDC. She was trying to get that out because we had all been lost and we'd already worked on this for years. And now she was riffed as well. And so there's literally no one there. We had to put an out of office message on our team inbox, a permanent one, saying this is not functional anymore, that no one is here to respond to these requests. What I'm hoping is that people will find us in our new work at Violence Prevention Solutions, where we're trying to help people and not charging for a lot of this work. We have so many partners in the field who are already implementing our programs. We just want to help them keep going and try to figure out how to get through this without discontinuing that work or pivoting to something else. And so we want people to reach out to us and say, hey, I can't find this stuff on the website anymore, or God forbid the website has been deleted. We're trying to figure out how to prevent that from happening, or where are these materials that were deleted in April because they were quote unquote DEI. That's what we're trying to do on that side now, but we have no one left on the inside who can carry that work forward. And so we don't really know what's going to happen to it, but I have a feeling it's wasted, which is really hard because we put a lot of love and work into that for years.
Yeah, and that's terrifying because especially with the teen dating and violence, you're starting at a younger age to implement prevention there that would last for a lifetime. And that's just, as a mother of a child who's about to be a teenager, like that's concerning.
Yep. It is not a good time to be losing that or any of our other work on firearm violence that we were not able to address for decades and finally just got some funding and ability to address. Work on sexual violence, which is a long-term problem, but one that has never let up and that needs to continually be addressed in better ways. We have child abuse and neglect and intimate partner violence that we saw spikes in during COVID, and we know that there are continually problems to protect kids. And we did see some improvements in that as well when there was increases in funding to support families after COVID or during COVID. And that funding was taken away. People are losing their health insurance. And we know all of these things are related to increases in family violence, in community violence, and in self-directed violence in the form of suicide, which is at an incredibly high level, especially for young people. And that some of the highest effects are for LGBTQ plus youth who have been experiencing all of these forms of violence at increased levels, even before this period, where now they're also being attacked by their own government and villainized. And that is, I can only imagine, making the situation much worse, but we've lost the ability to track that. As far as I know, we're not collecting data on that anymore, or the ability to release that data will be severely restricted. So that is a big problem. Even earlier this year, we were no longer allowed to use the word gender. We were no longer allowed to talk about trans people existing. And those things do not make any sense to anyone, right? We were often replacing the word gender with sex, but those are not the same thing at all.
I know.
And so it's just incorrect. It's just incorrect. And I think everyone who has any touch left with reality knows that that's incorrect. But here we are doing it anyways. And it's just making problems worse that already needed more attention and more funding and more effort to address them. And that is, again, scary.
Yes. Yes.
Recently, I saw a statement from the Texas Attorney General where he actually referred to corrupted ideologies like transgenderism and Antifa causing terrorism in the United States, and that the state of Texas was going to be going after these groups in undercover capacities. I've got it up. It's on their official government website right now, the statement. And so that's the kind of thing that I worry about. It's not just that we're not tracking it anymore. It's that by not tracking it, we're also missing the opportunity to see the origins of it, which in a lot of cases is statements from public officials like this. I don't understand.
Oh,
Yeah.
that I had not seen that. That is terrifying.
That is.
Yep.
Oh, I mean, when the people that are in power are making statements that, Philip, I'm going to say, I don't want to say incite, but you're going to say, but it does.
Yeah.
But when they're making statements that are incendiary, that basically call to action to people to even just turn their backs on someone, if not being violent, like physical violence, but to turn their back on entire groups of people, it just.
Yeah, okay. Here. I wasn't going to read the whole quote, but you tell me if this is incitement or not. Leftist political terrorism is a clear and present danger. Corrupted ideologies like transgenderism and Antifa are a cancer on our culture and have unleashed their deranged and drugged up foot soldiers on the American people. That's a Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Yes, yes. And you don't have to look very far to find out that that's not true. You can look at the last 5-10 reports out of Homeland Security, FBI, all of the reports that have ever come out about domestic terrorism, not a single one will say the primary problem is leftist ideology. There's none of that in there because it's not true. There are, of course, some left-wing people who have engaged in domestic terrorism, like animal rights groups or environmental groups.
Those are actually the big ones on the left side that actually turn to violence are usually animal rights extremists and environmental groups.
Right.
And there are quite a few studies that try and do a comparison of domestic ideologies. Everyone that I've found for the last several years has said left groups are less likely to resort to violence than far right groups. And yeah, it usually is. It's the animal rights and the environmental, which their violence is usually targeted at establishments. And they tend to try and do it when people aren't there because they don't want to hurt living things.
Yes, right. That's kind of the whole idea, right? Yeah, it's not mass violence against people. It's more property. That is a very different thing. It's also, I think, a very small proportion of all of the incidents in the last 20 years. So to say that that's the primary problem is factually untrue. And every administration, including Republican administrations and directors, have said the exact same thing.
Just as a legal disclaimer, it is not okay to set a lab on fire because you don't like it. But
That's right. That's right. That is also bad and domestic terrorism.
Yes,
but
they should also be prosecuted.
It is not the same as a mass shooting.
But speaking of shootings, there was a shooting at CDC headquarters I think it was like just 2 months ago. And the administration did not really react to it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So yes, just in case folks haven't heard about it, because there actually was not that much coverage considering it was essentially a domestic terrorism attack on federal properties. There was a person who shot more than 500 bullets at the CDC campus in August, right over the roof of the daycare center in the front, and killed a DeKalb County police officer in the process. Miraculously did not hit anyone else because the bullets went right through the windows, over people's cubicles, smashed all the windows in these huge buildings, and it will probably take months to repair that. The reporting suggested the person who also died at the scene was an anti-vax person who believed that CDC was responsible for COVID or trying to hurt people with vaccines, some such nonsense. not only did the administration not really respond to that, they did not say one word out of the White House about that attack. They let people go home from work for, I don't know, like a week and telework again, as everyone had for years, very successfully anyway. So this wasn't exactly a stretch. And then they immediately sent everyone back to work and said, you just work in those offices where there's bullet holes next to your cubicle. We will not be having any mental health services for anyone except what's been thrown together by some employees themselves who are tasked with providing their own mental health services, essentially. The only response that really happened was from RFK Jr., who showed up in Atlanta the next week and said, oh, this is terrible. And then the second sentence, so I don't know exactly what he said in the first sentence. It was something like, yeah, this is bad. The second sentence was, well, basically CDC had it coming. They shouldn't have been so terrible. And then this wouldn't have happened. So he came all the way here to blame the victims of this attack and then left town immediately after. So there's no response, no help. People have been traumatized since January in these jobs, and they continually are traumatized. And now on top of that, there is also a mass shooting against them where they now don't even know if they're physically safe in their workplace. So that is really hard. And sometimes we talk about this in terms of like the people who are still there are in an abusive relationship that they can't escape from because they have, the financial constraints. They can't quit their job. They can't afford to quit their job. Many people love their work and they don't want to abandon it. They don't want to abandon their colleagues. They don't want to drop all of this stuff on someone else's lap, especially when there's no one left to pick it up. But the people who have been riffed or who took the fork are on the outside now, we're not doing great either, right? We feel like we left the abusive relationship and now we're in a shelter and now we're just trying to survive and restart our lives without anything. That is kind of where they've left the federal service. That is intentional. That's exactly what Russ Vought said he wanted to do. He said he wanted to put all federal employees into trauma. And he sure has. He sure has. So if they actually want to get anything out of this government again, and I'm not sure that they do, I don't know what that piece is besides immigration related activities, they're not going to be able to get it because they do not have a fully functional workforce. They don't have enough people. They even fired HR at CDC last week. Who's going to do all the rifts? I need to get my health insurance fixed because my kids don't have health insurance now because they screwed up the paperwork. Who am I supposed to call if there's no HR, right? This makes no sense. So yeah. I think the government is broken and we're all going to suffer, even if we aren't already.
Yeah, we have talked a lot. Your comparison to the abusive relationship and the being in the shelter because I decided to leave. I took the deferred resignation. It was a choice. But the day that I decided, like the day that I got notice that I could take it, I was talking with Philip and I was so torn. Like, do I take it? Do I not take it? Like, I've got a choice. And Philip was like, can you come up with any reason that doesn't sound like a battered spouse, an abused spouse?
And I felt like the worst person in the world describing it that way. So you have no idea how, I don't want to say good it makes me feel to hear you describe it that way.
But validate it.
No, and maybe I shouldn't either because it's obviously not at a level of a real.
No, but there is also psychological abuse and it absolutely is psychological abuse.
Yeah. Yes. And I know like Philip saying it to me, like really snapped me to, oh, wow. Like I had to go into therapy. My health deteriorated terribly. And my biggest concern about staying was my squad, my people. I need to be there for them. It basically like caring for your children, and they are not children. They are grown adults who are very capable people. But you're right. That's how it feels. It feels like you're being abused and you don't know how to get out, or you just get pushed out and abandoned. I don't know where I'm going with that other than yes, that's exactly how it felt. Speaking of that's how we felt, you have used those feelings of abandonment and that fear that other people are not going to have these services and are not going to have these solutions available to them. And you have pivoted, and this is a great example of what civil servants do. They want to help people, and you have turned this into your new endeavor with Violence Prevention Solutions. Tell us a little more about what you're doing with this, how you are helping communities. Tell us more.
Yeah, so like you, I was also really concerned about my team and what they were going to do as well. And I know everyone does not have the same capacity for rebuilding as quickly, or the same context, or the same financial ability to not have a job immediately and to try to figure out something new. And so I felt like protective of my people, and I wanted to build something where all of us could survive and thrive and continue helping our communities to do the work that we know is effective, and to provide the technical assistance and the training and the guidance that we had before. And so that's the purpose of Violence Prevention Solution. It's to maintain the expertise we had in the government and provide that to communities that need it. The kind of work we do is right now a little varied because we're getting started. But what I want to do primarily in the long run is consult with nonprofits, higher ed institutions, community-based organizations, and state and local governments to review the work that they're doing on violence prevention, provide them a really clear evidence-based look at what they're doing and what is the likelihood that it's being effective, and then kind of comparing that to the evidence base and what we know about what works. And sometimes what people are doing is the best that they can with the resources and the knowledge that they have, but not necessarily the best that's possible for them to do if they had the resources and they had the expertise that they needed to level up those strategies to better align with what works. And so we then help them to develop those strategies based on where they are, to create a comprehensive plan for a violence prevention strategy that will really make a difference, and help them figure out how will they track that? How will they know if it's working? What does that program evaluation look like? What kind of capacity building do they need to do? And then in that final phase of this, we actually help them to build that capacity. So we will be developing a training academy. We'll have a technical assistance group that people can join to ask questions and get support when they run into barriers in implementing their plan. We can help them develop the capacity to do program evaluation and to be able to really effectively communicate that to funders so that they can increase the resources that they have when they're putting in grant applications, or they're talking to their board or their community partners, to build their capacity to do even more work in the future and build up their strategy. That's the kind of stuff that we did before. But honestly, I think that this way of doing it is going to be more effective because we have more capacity to do that than we did before. Before we had, everyone was very stretched with so many different duties. We were doing a lot of direct research ourselves, which we're not really able to do outside the government or outside of academia. So that piece, we're going to work with other partners to make sure we know what the latest evidence is, and maybe partner with universities to as like co-principal investigators on awards as well, and maybe maintain some academic connections so we can do that work as well. But primarily what we want to do is help communities through that process, from looking at where they are today and getting them to a place where all that effort and time and resources that they're putting into their work, which is a lot and really hard work, that we can make it easier for them and that we can make it more effective. I'm excited to do that. We have some folks that are doing it now, but we're just getting started as well. So we're kind of building and piloting this ship as we fly it and figuring out what's going to work and what people need the most and how we can help them with that.
I love that. Really being there for the communities and helping the communities to continue, even the resource of the people that you are bringing together to work with the communities. That's one of the big things that government made available to everyone, was that access to expertise. And I really love that you're putting that together. Again, you're bringing those experts together to work with communities to build that. And with just the way things have have been going this year, there has been a notable increase in violence that we've been seeing that has been shown to the public in the news. We're seeing a lot of violence just in how certain things are being approached right now. So
State-sponsored violence, essentially. That has an effect not only on the people who are experiencing it, but also entire communities. I was in Chicago last week for a meeting where some folks are trying to create new resources based on the National Plan to End Gender-Based Violence for communities, to take that plan and move it into communities, to make it kind of a resource that we can all use and a plan that we can all keep moving forward on, even outside of the government, because that was the first national plan to end gender-based violence in the US, which every other country already had a decade ago at least. But while I was there, I didn't really see a lot of activity with the National Guard or ICE. I don't know where they were exactly, but everyone was thinking about it. Everyone was worried about it. And that is the effect of this, to scare people, to make us afraid to go outside, to make us anticipate running into this kind of violence and fear wherever we go, and get used to it. And I don't want us to get used to it, because I think that is really dangerous in the long run.
Yeah, going back to something that Jordan Matthews, who we interviewed a while back, said, authoritarianism thrives on our silence and thrives on our fear. We were at a dinner and somebody was saying to us they were afraid to like certain posts online because, what if I've liked the wrong thing and now somebody's going to come after me, and they're afraid. So you've got this fear in our community, and fear can lead to violence.
There's a legal term for that. It's called a chilling effect.
Yes.
Yeah, nobody should ever fear their government. Moving this kind of work into the private sector right now is extremely important, because if you're afraid of your government and you don't feel like you can trust your government, how can you go to your government for the kind of help that you need if you're in one of these vulnerable communities? So what you're describing is absolutely necessary. Yeah, I'm really excited to see it.
Yeah, thank you. We're excited to be thinking through this, to try to figure this out. It's kind of fun and interesting to do if you ignore the context in which we're doing it, right? No one chose this. In the long run, I think it's kind of exciting, and maybe we can build an infrastructure that is as strong as what we thought the government was. Right? We never thought we would leave the government. We never wanted to leave the government. We never thought it was possible that we would be forced to leave the government, but it turns out that is possible. So we need to create resources that are more stable than that, because violence does not end when the government ignores it. In fact, it is currently getting worse. So we need to do what we can. And I think that as people who were for many years supported by the government and invested in by the government, that for the people that we tried to protect, that we worked for, like, it's on us now to take that and to try to do something else with it, because that was a gift while it lasted, and they're counting on us, whether they know it or not.
I can't say thank you enough on that, just because the work you're doing is so necessary, is so needed. To lose that expertise would be devastating to our country. So thank you for doing this. We will make sure in our show notes that we'll have your website in the show notes. It's prevent-violence.com. For anyone who wants to look this up, you have a blog, you have a newsletter, you've got resources there. Is there anything else that you would like to add? What's next for you?
What's next is that we are just trying to evolve. And that's actually the new brand of my business that will launch soon, Evolve Violence Prevention, with the idea that we're evolving. We're finding a way to create a new path for ourselves to do the work that we want to do. But we also want to evolve the field. We also want to make sure that people have access to the resources to do better work with what they have, and the passion and the hard work and the experts on the ground who see this and do this every day. We want to help them to increase the impact that they have and to evolve their work to align with the evidence base and be able to also tell people how impactful their work is, how important their work is in an even stronger way. So I am looking forward to that. We're trying to stay hopeful and helpful out here, and that's the best we can do in 2025. Right? And everyone does not have the ability to do that right now, and that's okay too. But those of us who can, I think we have a responsibility to do that.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been both terrifying and uplifting all at the same time. So thank you so much for joining us today and for forking off with us.
Thank you for having me and for doing this podcast, which I think is so amazing and was so great to just connect all of us. We have such a great group now of it's much bigger than a group, but of the former feds who are using our power to do good. And I love this idea for the podcast, and I can't wait to hear more episodes. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Forking Off. To our listeners still in government, remember, your integrity is worth more than your TSP. Leaving doesn't mean giving up on public service. It just means finding new ways to serve.
Until next time,
keep your ethics,
keep your dignity,
and we'll keep telling these stories.
If you're a former Fed with a story to tell, or you're wrestling with your own ethical crossroads, reach out to us at info@forkingoff.com.
Today's episode was created, produced, and edited by Jill and Philip Fields. Special thanks to our guest, Dr. Sarah DeGue. You can find more information about this episode at forkingoff.com. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Join us Monday, November 24th.
As we talk with Molly Kachowski, former Rocky Mountain Regional Director of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office is a relatively unique beast in the federal government. We were the only fully user fee-funded government agency. We did not take a dime of taxpayer money. Intellectual property supports about $8 trillion of the gross domestic product of the United States. So numbers matter and truth matters. So let's talk truth. First of all, where I've been able to summarize anything with respect to what has happened over the last 9 months is the stated goals do not match the reality of the consequences of their actions. And anytime messaging is about solving something, it's actually a crisis that they created that they now need to resolve.